This presentation was developed by members of the Royal Canadian Marine Search and Rescue. It is intended to give crew members information which will guide them through on board, in the water, and pool training exercises. During this training, information will be presented which will assist members when egressing from the Type 1 vessel in the unlikely event of a capsize. Capsize prevention must be the primary concern of all members on board. The coxswain must at all times ensure the vessel is being operated in a fashion which eliminates the potential of a capsize. The vessel speed and the manner in which it is being maneuvered must be adjusted to suit the sea and weather conditions. Training to prevent a capsize must remain the primary goal of all members. Throughout a member's career, their operating skills will develop over time. At no time should inexperienced members operate the vessel in sea or weather conditions that are beyond their skill level or the operating capabilities of the vessel. For the purpose of this training, the presentation is divided into 7 modules, each of which will be discussed in detail. We will discuss vessel characteristics which make the Type 1 vessel somewhat unique in the RCM-SAR fleet. Life jackets and PFDs worn by crews will be reviewed insofar as they relate to egressing from a Type 1 vessel. The Type 1 vessel is designed with seat belts, which is not common to other vessels. There is a need to fully understand their benefits as well as their proper operation to ensure the safety of those on board. Exiting a vessel that has capsized may be relatively common throughout the fleet, but the Type 1 vessel has some distinct features. With the presence of seat belts and the seating configuration of the Type 1, further discussion on this matter is warranted. The actual activities associated with egress are divided into 4 clear and sequential steps. It is a process-oriented activity. A thorough understanding of these steps may have significant and positive effect on egress. RCM-SAR has very specific processes in place governing crews involved in a capsize. These will be reviewed again here in order to provide a complete training package. And finally, whenever crew members who are not fully familiar with the Type 1 vessel are on board, or when passengers are taken on board, a briefing on egress should form part of the normal briefing process.
Away from the barge a little bit.
As stated earlier, the Type 1 vessel has specific characteristics which may not be common to other vessels. A review of vessel characteristics of this and the other vessels will facilitate the identification of the differences. For years, the Delta-configured vessels have been the most common. Their design is such that crew members are seated well in the open with little or no overhead obstructions. Although no vessel is completely free of snagging hazards, the Delta-configured vessels have fewer of these hazards than does the Type 1. The Type 2 Falcon-class vessel is quite unique in the fleet in that it is fully enclosed and is considered self-righting. Simply said, providing the doors and hatches are properly closed, it will right itself without the need for the onboard crew to initiate such action. Those vessels that have a windscreen, a small roof, and in which the crews are normally standing are referred to as T-tops. This design provides crews with additional protection from the elements when compared to the Delta configuration. As we look at these 4 types of vessels together, we can clearly visualize the distinct features of each. Let us now take a closer look at the characteristics of the Type 1 vessel. This vessel is what may be described as semi-enclosed in that it has a windscreen and a full roof. It is generally open on the sides, but many of the Type 1s have been equipped with detachable side curtains. Crew members are generally seated during transit and are required to wear seat belts whenever the vessel is being operated in non-displacement or planing mode. With the exception of the rear jump seat, which is located at the rear of the cabin and on the fore-aft centerline, all seats are equipped with fold-down hand grips. These grips were designed to give crew members additional support when operating in heavy seas. They do, however, present additional snagging hazards not common to other vessels. Since it is required that crew members wear their seat belts, the chance of being ejected during a capsize is reduced. Furthermore, the risk of sustaining personal injury during a capsize event is also reduced. In all likelihood, the crew members will be held seated in their chairs. As a result, the crew will in fact be in an inverted position, with their heads being lower or deeper in the water than that of the rest of their body. The flotation worn by crew members will contribute to the tendency of floating in the direction of the seat cushion. We will expand more on this later. Two of the most prominent differences of the Type 1 are the seat belts and the handholds. As seen here, each seat, including the rear jump seat, is equipped with seat belts. It is vital that these seat belts be worn and properly adjusted. The second of the two differences is that of the handholds and armrests. As seen here, the handhold is simply a fold-down device that gives crew members additional grip support. They do, however, present an additional snagging hazard that crews must be aware of during egress. This hazard is present without regards to whether they are in the raised or the lowered position. All members must, however, be aware of their presence so that egress actions can be guided accordingly. The primary objective of all vessel operation must be that of preventing a capsize. We would, however, be neglectful if we didn't take the time and train with the goal of effective egress in mind. Although it is not possible to train in an actual capsized orientation, crews must continually practice and vocalize the 4 steps of egress. In so doing, it is hoped that a form of muscle memory can be developed and crews will be better enabled to save themselves and to assist others. In this next module, we will discuss life jackets and PFDs. These devices, by their very nature, assist in keeping the wearer at the surface, or if submerged, direct that person towards the surface. This presents a rather distinct phenomena in that when you are inverted and your seat belt has kept you on station in your seat, the buoyancy may have a tendency of pinning you to your seat. While wearing flotation, it becomes significantly more difficult for a crew member to swim deeper into the water. This may be the case if there is a need to swim deeper to maneuver around obstacles or if required to swim down to get beneath the vessel tubes. The amount of effort to swim to a greater depth to get out from underneath the vessel will be directly proportional to the amount of flotation being worn. Cruiser suits, PFDs, or other types of additional flotation are some examples of items that may cause this type of additional challenge. Equipment vests being worn by crews almost always contain additional flotation in the form of an inflatable bladder. Careful consideration must be given prior to activating this type of flotation and should not be initiated until clear of the capsized vessel. An additional safety feature of the Type 1 vessel is the presence of seat belts. Policy requires that when the vessel is underway in non-displacement mode, crew members, while seated, must wear their seat belts and ensure they are properly adjusted. If the seat belt release mechanism is not properly worn, it may present a lethal hazard if the vessel is capsized. The release mechanism must at all times be accessible to the wearer. If it is improperly attached, or if the release mechanism is permitted to roll towards the body, it will be extremely difficult to release it while the seat belt is under load. Let's now look at some examples. This is a picture of a seat belt worn properly. Note that the release clasp is accessible to the wearer. This picture shows a seat belt improperly worn. The release clasp is next to the body and is inaccessible to the wearer to release. When the seat belt is under load, it will be next to impossible to release the clasp and therefore presents a risk to the life of the wearer. None of our SAR vessels are completely free of snagging hazards. The very nature of many of the operating devices present snagging hazards that are extremely difficult to eliminate. Throttle controls, steering wheels, and the like all present some level of snagging hazard. The Type 1 vessel presents unique hazards not common to other vessels. The most notable of these are the drop-down handholds and armrests. Although this hazard exists, whether they are in the raised or the lowered position, snagging potential is increased when they are lowered. This may also inhibit the free movement of a crew member attempting to exit the cabin area. Whether it be handholds, armrest, steering wheel, throttle controls, or any of the other snagging hazards, crews must become intimately familiar with the location of all hazards on board their vessel. The means by which a crew member exits or egresses from a vessel is often governed by the type of vessel and the member's location on board. Delta vessels offer good exit locations given they normally have no windscreen nor roof. Should this type of vessel capsize, chances are the crew will be ejected from the vessel to either side of the seat that they are occupying. T-tops are very similar to Delta vessels relative to the ease of exiting the vessel. In most cases, these crews are in a standing position and do not wear seat belts. This provides good freedom of movement during an egress. The Type 1 is unique in that crew members must exit from the same side of the vessel that he or she is seated. It would be an impractical expectation for a member occupying a starboard seat to cross over to the opposite side with controls or electronic equipment in their way. Suffice it to say that if you are occupying the starboard seat, you will normally exit to that side, just as somebody seated on the port side would exit in that direction. The exception to this is the aft jump seat, where the occupant would exit to either side or towards the aft portion of the vessel. This represents a rendering of the Type 1 console and provides a good visualization of exiting directions. The arrows indicate the direction a crew member would normally egress when occupying each of the seats. As with training afforded to float plane pilots, there are essentially 4 steps to consider during an egress. It is important that these 4 steps be considered every time you take a seat on board. When capsized, your time to complete all 4 steps of egress will be short, as you are now submerged and in an inverted position. We will discuss each of the steps individually and in detail later in the presentation. Of immediate concern following a capsize is to ensure that you do not panic. Confirm your location on board by finding your reference point. Your greatest opportunity of confirming your location is to find and hold on to your predetermined reference point. Release your seatbelt and be ready to exit the vessel. Do not activate any inflatable buoyancy at this time. Promptly leave the cabin area of the vessel. Let us now review each of these steps in more detail. Preparation for the entire process begins when you first board the vessel. As crews become more familiar with this process, it is anticipated it will be performed almost by habit. We must not allow ourselves to become complacent and regularly and consciously practice the routine. Once you have taken your seat, take a few seconds to review your surroundings. It is at this point in time you can actually make some decisions which will assist you in the event of a capsize situation. For example, you may decide the fold-down grips and armrests are not required on this particular voyage, and you choose to leave them in the raised position. Once your seatbelt is fastened and properly adjusted, ensure the release clasp is properly positioned so that it releases by pulling the tab away from the body. Should the class be improperly oriented, you will have great difficulty in shifting it so that it can be released. This can be life-threatening. Plan your escape route and note any snagging hazards that might impede your free movement. Create a mental plan on how you will exit the cabin and avoid any of these snagging hazards. As you orient yourself once seated, determine a reference point that is to your outboard side. Ensure you can maintain a good handhold throughout the egress process while leaving your other hand free to release your seatbelt and to assist you in exiting the cabin. During and following a capsize, you will be disoriented. It is critical you do not panic as the vessel movement ceases. Because you were vigilant in ensuring that your seatbelt was fastened and properly adjusted, you will have remained in your seat. Being aware of where you are, quickly finding your reference point will be of your immediate concern. Find and grasp your predetermined reference point. This will be your best guide as to where you will be required to go in order to exit the cabin area. The human eye is simply not designed to see well underwater. Even during daylight, the acuity of your vision will be impaired, and you will find that you will rely more on your sense of touch. Remember, do not let go of your reference point until you are positioned outside the cabin. Step 3 relates to your seatbelt. Using the hand that is not being used to hold onto your reference point, release your seatbelt by pulling the clasp away from the body. Until now, your seatbelt has held you in position and in your seat. Expect your body to immediately start to shift once the seatbelt is released. As you locate your seatbelt clasp, you will determine how diligent you were when it was originally fastened. If it is inverted, you will need to twist it so the clasp faces outward. It is next to impossible to release the seatbelt by pulling the clasp towards the body. Since you have held onto your reference point, you will more than likely quickly find your way out. Once your seatbelt has been released, you must promptly follow your escape route and clear the cabin. All crew members are required to convene at the transom, at which point a head count is to be made and a quick assessment of crew member injuries. Remember, as you locate at the vessel's safety line, the port quarter is now located to the right-hand side as if viewed from above. This is a result of the boat now being in an inverted position. There currently exist standard procedures pertaining to what actions must be initiated once the crew is clear of the capsized vessels. These procedures are taught to all RCM coxswains. To ensure all crew members have a consistent and common understanding of these procedures, we have included them here in this presentation. These procedures are to be followed following a capsize event and once the members are clear of the vessel. Of primary concern is to ensure that all crew members are accounted for and a quick determination of any injuries. This must be performed as quickly as possible following the capsize to ensure there are no crew members trapped beneath the vessel. For practical reasons, this head count and injury assessment can be performed as crew members assemble at the transom. Since the vessel is now in an overturned orientation, remember the port and starboard sides have altered positions when viewed from above. The first crew member arriving at the stern should swim the safety line out its entire length. The remaining crew members, with the exception of the coxswain, assist with the safety line deployment and convene as a group at the end of that line. The coxswain remains at the transom for the purpose of activating the capsize reversal system. It is imperative that the coxswain ensure all crew members are safely out of the way of the vessel prior to the activation of the capsize reversal system. The righting action of the vessel is extremely violent and may cause serious harm if crew members are in the water close by the vessel. The capsize reversal system is activated by pulling firmly on the handle, which is found at the transom near the port quarter. Once the system is activated, the coxswain must immediately follow the safety line out to join the rest of the crew members. Time is of the essence once the system has been activated. The entire process commencing from pulling the handle to when the boat is righted, takes approximately 7 seconds. It is important to note that should the coxswain be injured, he or she may not be the right person to activate the capsize reversal system. It may be necessary for another crew member to perform this activity. Once the vessel has come to a rest right side up, the crew member should now board the vessel. Remember, the body loses heat approximately 20 times faster in water than in air of the same temperature, and the physical dexterity of the crew members might be impeded. Normally, the most capable person will board first and assist the remaining crew members. As the crew prepares to board, it is recommended that they do so using the windward side of the vessel. In so doing, the tendency of the vessel being blown over top of the crew will be reduced. Getting out of the water and back on board is extremely difficult, especially when one considers the extra weight added by the wet gear worn by the crews. Vessels are equipped with some form of reboarding device, the most common of which is a deployable ladder. Crew members are instructed not to climb over the engines when boarding. They are slippery and have hard edges and may cause serious injury should a crew member slip. As mentioned previously, RCM SAR has training separate from this presentation which deals with capsize reversal. Once all crew members are aboard, perform another head count. Although you will have already performed a primary evaluation of crew injuries, do not bypass the opportunity for doing another. The crew will now have spent a fair bit of time in the water. Now that you can see their entire body, a far better examination of their conditions can be made. Chances are your onboard electronics, including your vessel's radio, have ceased to function. Don't, however, assume that to be fact until you've tested it. With advancements in marine electronics and making them more water resistant, it is definitely worth the effort. After all, it is critical that communication of some sort be established to arrange for assistance. If crew members carry personal handheld radios, these may be used in place of a non-functioning vessel radio. If efforts fail to establish voice communication, it may be necessary to activate the EPIRB. This will initiate an electronic distress message that can be used to summon help. Depending upon the type of EPIRB in use, some units come equipped with built-in GPS functionality. This type will transmit the EPIRB's location as part of the digital distress message. Most EPIRBs on rescue vessels will activate automatically. Ensure you are familiar with the type of EPIRB on board your vessel to determine whether it is activated automatically or requires manual activation. Even with an automatic EPIRB, it is prudent to check and ensure that they are functioning properly. Depending on weather and sea conditions, it may be necessary to deploy a sea anchor or drogue. Sea anchors are used to keep the vessel's head into weather so that the waves are taken on the bow. Sea anchors may act as a brake and reduce leeway caused by the wind. Once the immediacy of the righting and boarding is passed, don't forget to recover the safety line that was used prior to the activation of the capsize reversal system. If all other means of signaling have failed, don't forget to use your flares. Use them wisely as their numbers are limited. Type A parachute flares or Type B aerial flares can be used to draw attention to your vessel, while Type C flares are primarily used to guide a vessel to your location when that vessel is in range. There will undoubtedly be occasions when people are taken on board who are simply not familiar with your specific vessel. In these situations, these people need to be briefed with respect to various safety aspects of the vessel. This should include the locations of items such as flares, the person's desired location while on board, their duties in case of an emergency on board, etc. The briefing must be tailored to the person and their experience level. Search and rescue crew members from other types of vessels will need a significantly different level of briefing than most others. If they are new to a Type 1 vessel, the briefing should include issues surrounding seatbelt and egress, to mention just a couple. Other guests, dignitaries for example, would require a totally different briefing. People who are taken on board resulting from being rescued or for the transport of the sick or injured will require briefing based on their ability to move unassisted. Regardless of the situation, the coxswain is ultimately responsible for ensuring the people on board are properly briefed. If the coxswain does not do the briefing personally, he or she must be satisfied that a senior crew member is assigned that responsibility and completes it properly. Let us talk about each of the types of people taken on board in a little more detail. Possibly the easiest people to brief will be other crew members who are simply not completely familiar with a Type 1 vessel. These crew members will, in all likelihood, be members from other stations who are on board your boat during joint training exercises. In most cases, the briefing for these people will be limited to the location of distress signaling devices, the location of any gear that the crew members may be required to use, and the use of seat belts while seated on board. Chances are these crew members will not have had previous egress training as it relates to a Type 1 vessel. The coxswain or other senior crew member must, in addition to the regular crew briefing, take sufficient time to instruct people on the 4 steps of egress. Depending upon the experience of the crew member being briefed, it may be necessary to include other aspects of vessel operation to ensure their safety. For our purposes here, we will define a guest as a person who is not an RCMSAR member, nor a person who has been rescued or is being transported due to illness or injury. Remember that before any guest is taken on board, pre-authorization is required. This is not isolated to dignitaries, members of the media, or the like, but includes other persons taken on board during joint training with other agencies. For example, members of the RCMP, emergency medical services, ground search and rescue, etc., all require a form of pre-authorization. Even in situations where such pre-authorization has been obtained, careful consideration must be given not to take guests on board during heavy seas or adverse weather unless it is critically necessary. In situations when guests have been taken on board, the speed of the vessel and the manner in which it is maneuvered must be adjusted so as to ensure their safety. In addition to the briefing provided to guests unfamiliar with dedicated response vessels, the briefing must also include the 4 steps of egress. The last category of person taken on board discussed here are those people who have been rescued or who are being transported for medical reasons. It is impractical to develop specific procedures for each type of person or medical condition for which transport may be required. Common to each, however, is the need to ensure the speed and manner in which the vessel is being operated is conducive to the nature of the injuries and for the safety of all on board. In such situations, the briefing to people on board must be delivered in a manner which instills confidence in their ongoing safety, but should contain aspects of egress. This may be delivered in a fashion similar to the airline industry, who commences the briefing with wording such as, "In the unlikely event of an emergency on board, you should be guided by crew members who will assist you." All crew members are trained to deal effectively with emergency procedures. With respect to the handling of the sick or injured who are being transported by stretcher or spine board, normal safety briefings may not be applicable. To ensure the safety of these people, crew members must be prepared to assist people affixed to transport devices. In summation, it must be recognized that this presentation could not conceivably contain procedures which cover all possible situations which may develop during a search and rescue mission. It was, however, developed with the goal of increasing crew member safety while on board and to give a level of direction in the unlikely event of a vessel capsize. Our primary goal remains to prevent such situations, and all of our training must continuously support and reinforce that goal. In closing, we wish to extend our gratitude to all our RCMSR members for their valued efforts and volunteering of their services within the community.